We are back. It is now time for Overwatch League playoffs. So, going to be doing the bracket builder today. What we're going to be doing is I'm going to do all my predictions now. Full bracket, who everyone's going to pick, both sides, yada yada yada. But then I also might do shorter videos after after the matches have actually been completed, and pick the winners of the teams who are actually in it. So even if I get some wrong, then I can still go back, and then predict those, if that makes sense. Also, very soon we got an MVP video coming out where I pick my MVP and do a ranking of the 10 candidates. So look forward to that. But like I said, otherwise, not going to waste a lot of time. We're just going to get into this video because we got a lot of games to go over. The format will be pretty easy to explain as I go into it. So, they don't have it here, but the Houston Outlaws did pick the Boston Uprising, which means the Justice get the Titans. So first of all, Houston versus Boston. I truly think this one could go either way. ZP mentioned it on the broadcast. Houston definitely favored. I think they're definitely a better team. They've had better results. Yada yada yada. But Houston's also kind of cursed. They're a team that hasn't been able to win close matches ever. They've lost games that they should have won. So it would be a kind of Houston move to lose to Boston here. But if all's well in the world, Houston should win this. Boston, unfortunately to say, they don't deserve to move on here. It should be the Outlaws advancing and giving themselves a chance against the 6, 7, or 8 seed. So I am going to pick Houston here. I can't bring myself to pick Boston. I don't think Houston will mess this one up. They look great. They don't look great, but they have looked great in moments. They have the players. They have Dante. They have Linkser. They have enough DPS players. They got Blase as well. They have enough to cover. Remember, we are getting a bit of a meta shift. A lot of people think that we're going to see some Hog Zarya. So I'm going to operate under the impression we see a good amount of hit scan, pretty much an Asher or Widow at all times. Maybe a little bit of both. Probably some Tracer action. I wouldn't be surprised to see Sombra as well. But we'll see how it opens up. But I am operating under those. I don't want to, that assumption that we're going to see something like that with no main shields. Not a lot of real main tank action. But either way, I think Houston's still the better team. Like I said, I like their DPS core more in terms of their flexibility as well as just their upside and consistency. I think the tank line's a bit of a wash. I think Punk is gonna play some good Roadhog. If he is the one that plays Roadhog, I could see him pulling out and doing well. But in the end, like I said, I like Houston here. Meko has played a decent amount of Roadhog. When he was on NYXL, they've kind of used it as a little bit of a pocket pick at times. So I think he will do just fine on that. And in the end, I got Houston winning this one. They probably won't be that easy. Like I said, it's Houston. They'll probably drop a map. But again, don't have Boston winning this one. Then we have a very interesting one in Justice versus Vancouver. So I'm going to go with the Justice here. And the Justice, they have Decay now. And remember, they have Decay. If you hadn't heard about that, they did sign him. Originally, people thought that there wasn't going to be a chance for players to pick. The window was supposed to have closed. But because of, the whole situation of OWL changing, long story short, Decay is on Washington Justice. And this makes them a much more scary team than they were previously. They've been playing decent. I think this is still a pick'em. I think it was a pick'em before. But this is absolutely a team that Decay can just single-handedly win them the match. Like I said, I think we're going to see a lot of hit scan. And Decay has shown an immense amount of prowess on the Ashe and the Widow this season. Obviously he can go to the Tracer and absolutely carry. I maintain that's still his best hero. So it's an excellent pickup for Justice. And Ark mentioned this a little bit in his interview before playoffs. But they were Washington only had Tuba and Stitch for their 2 DPS. So now, Stitch, hit scan player, Tuba, a projectile player. Now that you have a third player whose main is hit scan, but can play a couple of heroes like Genji, and a couple of other projectile heroes very well, it gives them an immense amount of flexibility. And I think that this helps them out quite a lot. I think the tank line is going to be pretty solid here. If we do see Roadhog Zarya, the one thing that I would worry about is Roar a little bit. Where does he fit in? What role does he play? Because I would assume right offhand that Janu would be playing the Roadhog, but maybe they have one of their DPS players go to Hog, and you have Janu go to Zarya, and then you don't play your main tank. I think that is an option that could very well pop up for some teams. A couple that I'll mention in a little bit. But in the end, I don't want to spend too much time on this. I like Justice a little bit more as a team. And like I said, just the ability to absolutely carry from Decay makes Washington a very scary team. Because we've talked about, the additions of Janu and Stitch, months ago when it happened, and putting them together with now another extremely talented player, along with the other pieces that they already have, Ark and Aim God, two guys who have been playing for a long time. Justice could make a run. They really could make a run if everything fits right. They could also lose right away. But potentially the most dangerous team of these four, in my opinion, of making a deep run. So, after this, Gladiators have the first pick. And of course, they have between the two winners, which I'm going with Houston and Washington, and Toronto, because Toronto is that 9 seed, so they're kind of like the odd man out. As you can see, they're not even on the bracket until they get picked. So presented with these 3 teams, I would think that the Gladiators will go with the Outlaws. I think it would be close between Outlaws and Defiant. They've played Defiant before and beaten them. Last tournament in the old Countdown Cup. But I think that throughout this season, of the 3 teams, I think Houston's probably the best matchup for Gladiators. They don't fare well on control maps. Gladiators fare very well on control maps. So if you go to a long series, you're in really good shape. If you can make it to that map 5, if you don't win it even before that. So Gladiators just a better team. Houston did upset them a while back. But last time that they matched up, Gladiators were able to take it relatively easily. And like I said, Toronto, which I'll talk about in just a little bit here, Toronto projects as a pretty scary team depending on how the meta shakes out. I think that they could be kind of dangerous. And I just think that Houston is the best bet. Especially if Washington looks really good, like if Decay pops in and it looks solid, then no one's gonna want to play Justice right away. Like they're just not going to. So despite Houston being a higher seed than the Justice, I think that's who Gladiators would go with, because they're the team in my eyes that have had a combination of the least amount of ceiling as well as the least amount of production throughout the season. But again, I feel like this is subject to change depending on how these two teams perform. They both look really good, then maybe they go with, okay, we're gonna grab Toronto then, or maybe if one of them, one of the teams wins but barely and it's a sloppy match, then they're gonna want to jump on them. The advantage of being the 6th seed. So next pick is Atlanta. I think that they would go with of these two teams. I think they will go with Justice. Despite me saying that teams are going to be a little bit scared of them, this is still, new roster. Decay is going to be playing in his first, actual match with this team. Atlanta has lost in the Summer Showdown. They lost to Toronto. And like I said, I feel like having seen both of the teams play, in the new meta, in round 1, is going to be a huge advantage for these teams, because you can bet your ass that all the teams are going to be watching these matches. So you're going to be able to get a read, for what they like to do, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses in this new meta. With Toronto, they're not playing, so you don't know what you're going to get. So I think it'll be a tough decision for them, but push goes to shove, you go with Justice because you get the film on them, and they have their record on the season. Just they got Decay. but that doesn't mean it's going to integrate well. You know, it doesn't mean it's going to go well. So personally, I would love to see Justice versus Fuel, because that would just be hilarious. With, you know, Decay obviously goes for revenge right away, and that would leave Dallas with Toronto. Little unlucky for Toronto. Toronto has not been able to beat Dallas. Even like when Toronto was looking better and Dallas was looking rough, Dallas would still beat them. So it's a weird one. So I'm gonna go with Gladiators to beat Houston. Again, think they're a better team. You know, it's close, but I do think that they've established themselves as that fifth best team. You know, they did beat Valiant in a very, very close map 5 last time out. But, you know, besides that top 4, they also beat, you know, Atlanta, the number 7 team earlier. So I don't trust Houston. You know, they could beat Boston, but can they beat like one of the legit mid-tier teams? I don't think they can. I think Gladiators do sneak themselves into the double elimination round. Because remember, if you get through round number 2, and you get to round 3, it is down to double elimination. It's very similar to what it was in last season's playoffs. So then if say Gladiators win, they go play Philadelphia. Philadelphia beats them. They go to the lower bracket. They're not eliminated. But if you lose in round 1 or 2, you are done. Your playoffs are over. Your season is over. So I just don't see Gladiators bowing out this early. You know, I think that when they meet their end, it's going to be at the hands of a Paris or a Shock, you know, or a Fusion. But this team is too good to lose to Houston early on. Then Atlanta versus Washington. Again, very interesting matchup. You know, Atlanta has not done much to bolster people's faith in them. You know, taking losses to. They did push San Francisco to a 5th map, but it didn't. I mean, it didn't look like prime San Francisco for sure. They also did lose to Gladiators. You know, a match that they really wanted to win. You know, they had an opportunity to be the 6th seed instead. I believe, yeah, before the week started, they had a chance at the 5 seed, but you know, 2 losses and a 1 win for the Valiant put, you know, that the other LA team through. So I still think Atlanta wins this one, though. I can't quite go on a limb to pick Washington. Again, Atlanta's just been a better team all season. While they have been disappointing, they've still been solid middle of the pack in NA. So while I don't think they get much farther than round 2, I do think they get past it just barely. And then you got Dallas versus Toronto. So despite, you know, the history, Toronto can't beat Dallas this season. I'm going to go with the Defiant. Again, I just don't quite trust the Fuel. And maybe again, Toronto is my second team. I would count myself as a Toronto fan, you know, Gladiator fan first, and then Defiant. But this is also when I just think about this meta. You know, if we have Roadhog Zarya, Toronto has 2 players, you know, in Surefour and Agilities who have been known, you know, to whip out a bit of Hog. Surefour in particular had some great performances on Hog in the Overwatch League. So I think that they have options. You know, Nevix has been solid on Zarya when he's played her in the past. So I think that Toronto has a couple of looks there. But especially, you know, if it's a hit scan heavy meta, you can put Agilities or maybe Beast if he's been practicing it. I don't know, like whoever looks best on Roadhog there. And then if we do see double hit scan, you put in Logix and Surefour, and that's a very potent duo. And if it's one hit scan, then like I said, you can shift Surefour to the Hog, and then you can still run Agilities and Logix, which has been a very solid DPS core. So again, this one could go either way. These are 2 very inconsistent teams who have been up, who have been down. I just like the upside of the Defiant more than the Fuel, you know? If they play their 2, I assume they'll keep pretty much their same lineup. You know, you have probably Note on the Roadhog, you know, Gamsu on Zarya, or maybe vice versa. I don't know. Maybe they run some like Winston. But I just don't envision seeing that much Winston, Orisa, or Ryan. And I think that this more like frag, flanky style, I think that suits Toronto more than it does Dallas. So I think that we will get that upset there. We will not get the 6, 7, and 8 all moving on. So that sets up round number 3. So, you know, Philly has choice of team. again, they got both the LA teams to pick from. Valiant, just like Toronto here, they get to skip round 2. They get a free, they get a free bye into the double elimination format because they placed high enough in the regular season at number 5. So, oh wait, there we go. So Fusion, looking at it, Valiant, Gladiators, Atlanta, Toronto. Again, it probably depends on how they perform as well in round 2, but just going off, the season, previous matchups, I think they'd have to grab Defiant here. They've done very well against Toronto in the past. Of these last 4 teams remaining, Toronto obviously had the weakest regular season. And if you're Philly, I think you can go into that match very confident. Whichever team they pick, I think you can go in very confident. Philly, obviously one of the big favorites to advance. I would say 95% of people say, it's going to be Fusion Shock moving on, to that Final Four. With the other 5% being, no, it's going to be Paris instead of one of those two. But other than that, I don't think people are saying Florida's making it. I don't think people are expecting either of the LA teams or, Atlanta, any of these lower ranked teams. So, if there's going to be a Cinderella run, it starts here. If you can get an early win, and save yourself from that lower bracket. But like I said, I think that Philly is definitely going to be looking at Toronto and saying, okay, they're the weakest. Next is Shock. So this one's a close one for me. They've obviously had success against all these teams. They've had the most struggles against the Gladiators. I have a sneaking suspicion they're going to pick Reign if this is the scenario here. San Francisco, they're the type of team. They barely beat Atlanta last time. I think they're going to want to get them back and say, all right, guys, we're going to slam you now. Like, we're going to, this is the playoffs now. We're serious. We're going to smash you and prove that weeks ago it was only close because the Shock weren't fully focused. That seems like a very San Francisco move. So, like the 2-7 matchup there. Next is Paris between the LA teams. I think they probably go Gladiators. Paris has done well against Gladiators this season. Overall in the season, obviously Gladiators being 6, Valiant being 5. Map breakers are very close, but you could say that the Valiant performed to higher levels than the Gladiators did this season. They're a little bit better throughout the entire season. And Paris did beat them as well recently, but yeah, I think Valiant are a little bit of a more, they're definitely going to play it close. The Gladiators could give you a really good run, or you could catch them on a little bit of an off day and you could just kind of roll them. So I think that the safer bet for Paris is definitely the Gladiators, and that's why they'll go with them. And look at that. Once again, it looks like every time these guys are playing each other, Florida and Valiant. So no upsets quite yet. Overwatch League history shows us that it's not a great idea to pick upsets, especially early on. I don't think Philly is going to look past Toronto here. I think they're just going to size them up, say, okay, this is what we've done against them in the past. This is what they're doing now. This is what we're doing well now. And they're just going to pretty much breeze through them. I think they're going to perform very, very well. I don't, this isn't the Philly team of old where they just come out super flat for a week. They've exerted themselves in every single match. So I really like Philly. Personally, even though I don't have that much against Philly, I don't have anything against San Francisco. I would love to see one of them get knocked out before the grand finals, just to see it. We really the best Cinderella story that we've gotten in Overwatch League was London in Season 1 winning it all, because they were the 5th seed. They had been super inconsistent all regular season, but at the same time, they were projected as one of the top teams in the league the entire season. Basically everyone had them in their top 3 of the preseason, so it wasn't a surprise that they won. It was just a surprise that they had struggled up until that point. So, to have a true, this season, to have a true mid-tier team go on a crazy run would be awesome to see, but I don't think it starts right here for Toronto. Got Philly winning that one. Then you got Florida versus Valiant. These teams have had some great matches, man. I go back and forth with this one. Just because we see a bit more of a hit scan meta, I think the Valiant get this one. A little bit of an upset here. I think it's a great close match, but I do think that the Valiant stay out of that losers bracket for now. Just because, KSP has been so good. If there is a meta where, hit scans are empowered, this bodes very well for Valiant. He's been so good. They once again they can bring in Shax. I think that can be a very powerful duel depending what the meta is. You still have KSF waiting, you still have KSF waiting in the wings. You get the KS bros. And I think that Valiant's tanks are also flexible enough to pick it up. If it's Roadhog Zarya, if it's maybe see Ball Hog, Ball Zarya, Winston something, whatever we end up seeing, I trust the Valiant's tanks to do a solid job on it. McGravy and Dreamer have been really solid all season. So I got the Valiant in a slight upset there over Florida. Next, we got the Shock taking on Atlanta. Like I said, I think the Shock roll them here. I don't think it's close. I think we see fully locked in, engaged playoff San Francisco. If Roadhog, assuming Roadhog gets played a lot, which a lot of people think he will, I think he will. Shoyobin is just nasty on Roadhog. He is so good if you have not watched him. He has at least one account that's purely a Roadhog smurf that he would just take the top 50 when Roadhog wasn't good. So the guy is a nutcase on the hero, one of the best in the world. And it's San Francisco. No matter what this meta ends up being, they're the most meta-proof team in the league. So I think that they beat Atlanta here with relative ease. Next, Paris Eternal versus LA Gladiators. No, we're going with Paris here. Again, Paris is the team of the top three that worries me the most in terms of metas. I think Philly and San Francisco are very meta-proof. Paris, not as meta-proof, but they did perform, even after Genji got nerfed a little bit. They still look really solid. They've been a better team than the Gladiators this season. Like I said, they've established themselves as that third team. They've done what nearly every other NA team could do, in winning the Summer Showdown. So, what kind of DPS rotation do we see here? I really think we're going to see a good amount of Xe. I think that, again, it depends. I think Xe soon could be a possibility. We're probably going to see Sparkle on a couple of maps here and there. He probably won't see full-time play, though. Genji is not that powerful anymore. He's pretty bad now, honestly, after the nerfs. So, even with that, Ben Best has pretty much overperformed on all of the roles that he's picked up this season. Hanbin is a very, very good off-tank on everything. I think that no matter what they run him on, if it's Roadhog or if it's Zarya, I think that he's going to perform very, very well. And that's honestly one of the things I'm looking for the most. Like, maybe some of these teams brush off some of their older DPS players that haven't played pretty much at all this season. Maybe they just had him in the lab for weeks just cooking up the hog, and we see the reemergence of some people. That would be cool to see. But in any case, I do like Paris moving on here. Cannot go with Gladiators in this matchup. So down to the losers bracket. I got Florida knocking out Toronto. Again, Florida, they've just been a better team all season. I can't quite go for the upset here. I feel like I've picked against Florida too much this season, and I haven't really given them the credit that they deserve because they've been a great team. They have been the fourth best team in NA. They deserve this seed. They really do. They had the one meta that was the best for them, but they've been really solid in all the other metas. So I don't see them getting knocked out of the playoffs before winning a match. Definitely not. Well, like I said, there's a lot of things I like about Toronto. I love Florida's production. Again, the tank line, one of the most underrated in the league. Gargoyle continues to just fly under the radar as one of the best freaking off tanks in the league. You can't go wrong with Fate. So, I really, really like this Florida team. I think that they are going to they could definitely push, for this grand finals. I don't think they'll quite make it, but if some of the other teams don't quite pay attention to them, they could very well get a couple of wins early on and find themselves in a good spot to make that grand finals. Then you got Atlanta Reign taking on LA Gladiators. So I'm going to roll with the Gladiators here. The Gladiators have beaten Atlanta the last couple of times that they've played. They have had some close matchups. I think this one would definitely go down to the wire. But I think Atlanta's still just missing that spark. I think they've lost a little bit of cohesion. I think losing a voice like Baby Bay in the team has hurt them. They have the players for sure, but they haven't shown those high highs in the last month or two. I really think it would take like a Spitfire-like miracle for them to just kick into gear, because they've been pretty despondent when they've played against the good teams in the league. So, got Gladiators here. Again, I've talked about the flexible DPS. I really think that that's important for this playoffs, and of course, Gladiators have that. Birdring has been playing phenomenal on Hitscan, and Junkrat/Sim as well. Kevster has been an excellent addition. Mirror has shown great things on multiple roles. Maybe we'll see him on like Zarya again. And you put Space on Roadhog. I think that's a pretty nasty 1-2, or maybe Space on Zarya, OGE on Roadhog, something like that. I think that the Gladiators are a quite flexible team. As long as the support roles line up pretty well for them, this team is dangerous. So I do think that they take down Atlanta in a very good matchup. And you got Philly versus Valiant. I think Philly beats them pretty easily. Valiant have not fared well against the Fusion this season. The Valiant are a team to me that, while I've praised their tank line and while they deserve it, they very clearly have their game plan of, we're going to empower our DPS players. And when they've played Philly the last couple of times, the Fusion have gotten a great read out of this. And they've rotated between obliterating the Valiant backline and just focusing KSP or Shax so hard that they just can't pop off. And when they have that, and when they have these neutral fights, where it's pretty much just the tank line, and their supports battling each other for, who can get the better damage output, who can rotate shielding better, who can charge their ultimates faster. Philly has easily won that neutral fight. So while the Valiant are very solid still, I really don't like them as a matchup for Fusion, and I don't think that they are able to pull off another upset here. Next, San Francisco taking on Paris. Great matchup here. Again, if Paris is looking really strong, in this new meta, I think we could have a great matchup here. I can't pick against San Fran, though. I think if they do lose, it would be early on. I think when in this scenario, they're just in their best. They're at top form. Obviously last season they lost right away to Atlanta in the playoffs, and then they made their losers bracket run. I don't think they want to go for that again. I think that they're going to be a bit more committed here. One thing I'm looking for in this is, what do we see out of San Fran's support line? I think a little bit of the reason why San Fran has struggled at points is because they've been rotating their backline so much. And they have three tremendous players, obviously all-star level players, in Moth, Alarm, Twilight. So I just think that they've lost a little bit of coordination and cohesion with that rotation. So I think that pretty early on, they're going to have a set 2, and this is going to help them be a lot cleaner, in their execution. So got San Fran moving on in a great competitive match. Going through, again, a couple more elimination games. This would be amazing. You got Paris versus Florida, 3 versus 4. Those two teams that have been, gnawing at the heels of San Fran and Philly all season long. That matchup. And then another battle for LA in an elimination game. That would be amazing. Love to see it. So for Paris versus Florida, I don't know why, but I'm going with Florida. It's a little bit of a gut feeling. The more I think about this Florida team, I think that this playoffs is very much so going to be about backlines surviving and making sure that you have that good tank combo. And I like Florida's supports more than Paris's. I think that they've done an excellent job of staying alive this season. I think that they're incredibly underrated. And while, I love Fielder, the when they won the summer showdown, and everyone's celebrating, and he's just sitting in his room in Korea, the 200 ping god, legendary. The man has a mystique about him. He's insane. He's an insane player too. But I think that in particular, FD God has made amazing plays this season and has just thrown at times. And I think that Florida's going to be able to take advantage of this. Yaki is an MVP candidate. And I think that the combination of him, BQB, if we saw the resurgence of Saya on Hitscan, that would be amazing. But even if we don't, BQB has been very, very good on the Ashe this season, as well as Widow. He's definitely surprised me after a relatively disappointing season 2. But I like Florida for this type of meta a little bit more. I think they're going to be able to get a little bit more value consistently out of the DPS. They're going to protect their backline. They're going to play a little more defensively, I think, on the tank roles, and it's going to give them a tactical advantage over Eternal in this one. So that would be a little bit of a early exit for Paris, but like I said, I like Mayhem for this. I really do. Next, you got the LA teams. And I'm going to go with the Valiant here. It pains me, it breaks my heart, but I'm going with the Valiant here. That very thing that I just talked about in the last matchup, keeping the supports alive. If we see this meta develop without shield, it's going to be similar to dive meta in the fact that you have to keep your backline alive. And when the Gladiators have struggled this season, one of the key things has been that backline just gets killed. I'm not even sure whether to put that on Big Goose and Shaz, whether to put that on the tanks a little more. Whatever the case may be, if it's the DPS for not checking the other DPS more. But, like I said, when we've seen Gladiators struggle, when they lost to Philly, the teams looked about even. Gladiators looked a little better in that melee. But Philly, they had the adaptation. They put Carpe on the Tracer, and he just kept sticking Shaz. He kept killing him every fight, and it just turned the entire tide of the series for Philly. And again, Valiant have those players. If they have the Tracer, they have Shax, who can absolutely do that as well. If they have KSP, who can dismantle entire teams by himself. KSF has been extremely good in spurts this season and last season. So it's going to be super, super close. It could go either way. Battle for LA's always do, but the Gladiators have won a lot in a row. They won a really close one last time, and I just have a feeling that Valiant are due to win one in this series. They've been a little more consistent all season long. Well, I think that the Gladiators have a bit of a better tank line, that the Valiant's DPS are going to just make the difference here by a hair and send them into the losers bracket semis. So, Philly versus Shock. I got Shock here. I think they're punching their ticket to the grand finals. Last time these guys played in the regular season, Philly kind of cleaned San Francisco up. They had a much better read of the meta. They looked more confident. They locked in that number 1 seed. But this is a revenge game for San Fran. They're gonna roll. And if we do get here, and I don't think they're gonna roll as in they'll crush them. It'll be just a complete wipeout. But I do think that they're going to be the superior team by a little bit. What we've seen in the past with these two teams, where Philly is amazing, but San Fran is just better. And for the losers, that sets us up for a rematch of round number 3 with Florida going up against LA. You guys know me if you've watched the videos. I'm going with Florida here. Good teams, when two good teams play, and one good, say team 1 has won like 2-3 in a row, every time you win against a team that is similarly skilled to you, your chances of beating them again just go down. You know, when there are two teams of similar skill, you just don't see one of them rack up 7 wins in a row. So I think that the Mayhem turned the tide here. They set up a grudge match with Philly, from all the way from back in May Melee when Florida knocked them off. But as I said before, I like Florida's tank line and support line here a little bit more than the Valiants. And I think that the DPS are pretty much a push. I've been critical, of Yaki in the past because I felt like he really only excelled on like the Tracer, but he's also shown incredible proficiency on stuff like Echo, Sombra, a couple of the hit scans a little bit. Obviously that's been mostly BQB's realm, but he's absolutely capable of popping off on more heroes than that. And like I said, he is very much so a flanking DPS. You have your different types of DPS players. You have the ones that really eat into the enemy tank line. You have the ones that play really defensively and force other enemy DPS players out of position. And you have the ones that flank and frag. And Yaki is a fragger. And I think he's going to do that a lot in this match, and they're going to get revenge. I think both of the matchups between these two teams are super, super close, but in the end, the Mayhem are going to edge it out and get to one game before the grand finals. But, as I said before, when they really count, upsets just have not happened yet in the league, and I don't see it happening yet. I got Philadelphia Fusion punching their ticket to the grand finals as well over the San Fran Shock. Over the Florida Mayhem. I was looking at that. Obviously, these two teams won't play when they get to here because, two teams from each region will then qualify for the Final Four. But yeah, Florida, great team, great season. They've really turned the organization around after 2 absolutely abysmal seasons, but I don't think they're quite ready yet. Philly, I like their DPS a little more than Florida's. I like their tank line a little more than Florida's, and I like their support line a little more than Florida's, but just a little bit, And they've performed really well without Carpe in the lineup at times, which is another sign of just how much this team has grown and developed. Like I said, in terms of coaching staff performances this season, I have Paris's coaching staff at number 1, and Philly's is number 2. And then you got like Florida and San Fran after that. But these two teams have really, really stood out in terms of preparation, consistency, being innovative, adapting to metas. I have to hand it to Philly. After being an extremely talented team the first 2 seasons that was not consistent, that their performances depended on the meta. They had players that had they're huge highs and very, very low lows. They have turned into a consistent juggernaut this season, and there comes a point. I'm not a big Philly fan. You guys know it, but there comes a point where you have to give credit where it's due, and Philly has been incredible this season, and I got them going to the grand finals along with the San Fran Shock. So we got Asia. Chengdu Hunters taking on London Spitfire. I'm going with the Hunters here, probably just because I have a little bit of a soft spot in my heart for the Hunters. They had that run pretty recently. London hasn't won in a while. Shout out to this art, by the way. I love the art in the bottom here. But like I said, the Hunters, the highs have just been a little higher. I think that this is going to be a bit more of a chaotic meta. Particularly, in Asia, they've had generally a little bit of a different meta than North America. But I think this one's chaotic. I think that Chengdu is able to take advantage of that. I think that their tank line is going to could really excel when it comes to these weird things. And they have DPS players that can absolutely go over and flex onto that Roadhog or that Zarya. So, while there are certain things I like about London, I feel like they've played too much hot potato with their lineup. It's hard to keep track of, all the guys that they've been bringing in and out at this point. And with the Hunters, we've seen amazing performances from this team. And I think that they're just a bit better. I don't see them going out in round one. I don't want to see it happen. So London, young team, have had exciting moments, but it's just not. It hasn't gone well for them recently, and I don't see them turning it around in playoffs. I really should have grabbed water. New York Excel gets first choice between Seoul and Hunters. I think you got to go with the Hunters here. Seoul is super dangerous still. I can't even click these. Imagine how freaking bad I am at games on here. I am trash. But anyway, New York taking on Chengdu. I got New York in this one. Chengdu usually keeps it kind of close with New York. I think you might steal a map here. But in the end, I don't see New York getting knocked out that early. That would be a massive upset, massive letdown for them. They've been a bit disappointing, especially lately, losing a couple of matches that they really shouldn't have. But like I said, they've been a better team than Chengdu all year long. I think they've established themselves as that 3 team in the Asia region, and I'm really interested to see who Shanghai is going to pick for their matchup, because that could change the entire course of the Asian region. Because I think even more so than NA, there is a chance of a team like Seoul, like New York, or even Spark jumping into one of those last seeds along with Shanghai. Because while Guangzhou has been great in moments, they've had some let-ups. But in terms of Hangzhou Spark versus Seoul Dynasty, I've gone back and forth with this one. Last time they played, the Spark won easily 3-0. But I'm going with Seoul. I gotta roll with playoff Seoul. I don't feel comfortable picking against them. I just don't. So I think they move on here. This might be the toughest matchup for them, in terms of getting the ball rolling. I think if they win this one, they have a legitimate chance at getting to that grand finals, and I'll explain why in a second here. But Hangzhou's been a really solid team all season. I think this is a great matchup. The Spark have been more consistent than the Dynasty. I feel like the Dynasty have had a bit higher highs as well. There have been times when they look like the second best team in the region. And Hangzhou, I feel like at best they've been 3 to 4 range. So, like I said, I got the experience of Seoul here. Well, this one could definitely go either way. I just don't see guys like Prophet, Gesture, Marvel. I don't see this team, Badoshin. I don't see them going out right away. Maybe I'm holding on to a little bit of nostalgia here. If Hangzhou wins this, then I'm out. I'm out on Dynasty. See what they do in the offseason. But like I said, I just don't see it happening right now. So for Shanghai, they've had success against everyone in their region. They've been the best team handily. But they've really had Seoul's number. So I think they go with Seoul here. I think Seoul's maybe a little bit more dangerous than New York, you could say. But at the same time, New York has been better than Seoul almost the whole season. So and Shanghai has had Seoul's number. They really have. Obviously you talk about that Melee, the 0-3 comeback, the insanity there, and then since then it's been just all Shanghai. So I had Dragons going on here. I think they're gonna stomp through this Asian bracket. I think they absolutely take Seoul down without breaking too much of a sweat. And I think whoever they get in round 4, they're just gonna slap out of the way, and they're gonna 2 matches. That's it. They're in. Oh, I'm so hyped for the Final Four. I'm so hyped to see Shanghai finally play against the top teams in NA. But going on to the other 2 teams who are super dangerous here, you got Charge, you got Excel. I'm going with Charge here in a really close one. Again, this one more of a gut feeling. Could definitely go either way. The Charge have fallen off a bit after winning the Summer Showdown. Countdown Cup didn't go nearly as well for them, of course. And they have lost to New York more recently. But I think they get a close win here. I think a little bit of playoff bad luck hits New York here. I don't know exactly, I don't think New York is quite built for this meta too much. That being said, New York is pretty meta proof. They're at least good in pretty much every single meta. So I do think that Guangzhou gets a close victory for them. However, there are times, it's the same thing for NA. When you get to the upper bracket, the winner's bracket, there are times when I almost have the advantage of the team that loses in here. So I got New York beating Seoul in the loser's bracket in a very close matchup. Part of me just wants to see New York get really far. Last season they got farther than they did in season 1. They actually won a couple of matches in the playoffs, but they still didn't quite get to where a lot of people wanted them to be. And I think that they're just a better team than the Dynasty. No matter the names that are on Seoul, New York has all those names too, and they have more productivity to back it up. So I do think New York gets the job done there. Why do I feel like Libero is going to flex onto one of the tank roles and be really good on it? He'll be a really good hog or something. Who knows? They've got a million players that they can do stuff with, but I definitely got New York over Seoul. And then I got New York. I've picked a couple of these, but I feel like New York's going to be able to make some changes off of that. And like I said, whoever loses the last matchup before grand finals, you have to pick yourself back up mentally for that elimination game. I think New York is going to be feeling good coming off of a nice victory against Seoul. So I think in a very close matchup, New York is able to punch their way into the Final Four. Like I said, the 3 teams that everyone is talking about, it's Shanghai, it's Philly, it's San Francisco. Who is going to be that 4th team? I think New York steps up to the plate here. Season 3, I know the last few weeks have been a little rough for them, but I really like some of the strides they've made this season. Some of their highs this year have been really nice. And like I said, they're flexible enough that this could be a meta where they feel kind of weird at first, and then they start to pick up steam, and then they start to really feel it. But one thing is for sure, there's going to be some great matchups. But yeah, here's my bracket. These 4 going to the grand finals. If it does match up like this, then you'd have Shanghai v Philly and San Fran versus Excel. Definitely taking San Fran there, and I'm taking Shanghai there. I don't want to talk about those too much. I think San Francisco is just better than New York. And that's pretty much it. They've been better all season. More meta proof. I like their range of flexibility is a little better. New York has a ton of flexibility, but sometimes they get a little bit bottlenecked at certain roles. Hacksall is great, but there's overlap with Libero. Then you have Nene in there, but it hasn't really quite synergized with some of them. Sabiolbi was in for a while, and he's been out for a while, so it's kind of weird. Definitely think that Shock is still the favorites for me, narrowly, and they set up a excellent round 2. This is the round 2 I'm hoping for. If we get to see Shanghai play Philly and then San Fran right away, or vice versa, they're going to either way, because they're in separate regions. But I definitely see this in my mind a lot more than the flip side. New York versus Philly. Again, I think we get a really close one here. I like Philly a bit more though. I think that New York is the first team to get knocked out. Unfortunately, I can't put any other team in that top 3. These are the 3 top teams all season. We've talked about them so much, and while I love upsets, I love Cinderella stories, we just don't see them that much in OWL. So, again, Philly wins a good one. I think that's closer than the San Francisco-New York series. But then you got Shock versus Dragons. And I got Dragons taking down Shock the first time. Mostly because I think both these teams haven't really seen a team like the other yet. You could argue that the Shock have had a little bit better competition because they've had Philly to play against. They had, Paris, as well as Mayhem, who were both absolute juggernauts. And, Shanghai has had Guangzhou, who had a really, really, really good meta for them, but otherwise they've just been good. You've had New York, who's been really, really good, but hasn't quite, hasn't ever reached the level of Shanghai. But that being said, I think Shanghai is going to fall down early to Philly, come back, beat them, and then have a really good feel for what to do against San Fran, because at the same time, NA hasn't been able to like physically play against some of these slightly different comps that Asia's been running. So we'll see how they match up. Which compositions, which metas, you could say, if they are different, which one is better. But first time through, I like Shanghai. I think they're going to get off to a really strong start here. Like I said, they're going to be riding high on that momentum from Fusion. And San Francisco playing New York isn't as good of as a precursor, as Shanghai playing Philly. That's how I see it. And then one more duel between San Fran and Philly. I'm going with the Shock here. I got the Shock. Like I said, I like their team a little bit more overall. I think that their DPS players are a little bit better suited for this meta, and they're a little bit better overall. I'm taking Ons and Striker and Rascal and all those guys over, your Carpe, Hisu, Ivy, Chipsa. So, one last duel between these juggernauts from NA, but I just can't bring myself to pick against the Shock. I think that they're still numero uno until proven otherwise, and I can't see them not in the grand finals. So, great matchup, but when push comes to shove, I'm going with San Fran to clutch it out. Then the rematch, Shanghai just won against San Fran. This is how I envision this one going. Map 1, Shanghai. Map 2, San Fran. Map 3, San Fran. Map 4, Shanghai. Map 5, San Fran. Shanghai ties it up, and the Shock are your champs. I know, not super innovative. Wow, going for the repeat champs. Shanghai has been an incredible story. I really want to pick them. However, I see a couple more flaws in Shanghai than I do with the Shock. And again, I think a large part of this Final Four is going to shake out to, okay, what are the metas? What meta develops in NA and what meta develops in Asia? Because I think they will be slightly different. I really do. I think at least a couple of like the DPS/support choices will be different. And those style clashes are going to be extremely important. Which one is better against the other, and then which teams can, swivel. Which ones can pivot. How do you adjust in game? And Shanghai has shown that they can do that. Obviously, coming down 0-3 from the Dynasty, but for the Dragons, they're going to be fresh. They're going to be new into this type of scenario. San Francisco has been in this situation before, and they obliterated their opponents. This time, I think it's really, really close. I don't see either of these teams blowing the other one out. Honestly, if there's a blowout, it'll be Shanghai just going insane. But if it is close, which I think it will be, obviously, I have San Francisco here. I think the clutch factor is a little bit higher. Obviously, this is a team of champions. They're so experienced. They have such good coaching. I think Shanghai could very well win this year. I think they could very well win next year. But when push comes to shove, if this is our finals, I'm taking the Shock. So, there's the bracket. My throat hurts. Very long video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun to make. Like I said, these brackets have been a blast, all of them to make. So, as always, let me know what you think in the comments down below. You guys have any upsets? Any 6 seed, 7 seed, 11 seed in NA running the ladder, making a big push? You got any players you think are just gonna pop off this playoffs with the new patch live? I'm very curious to know what you guys think. But other than that, as always, thank you guys very much for watching. Thanks for the incredible season. It's been amazing, despite all the setbacks, despite the current state of the world. It's been a bit of a haven for me. Watching every weekend has been great. You get a little bit of a reprieve from the real world. And yeah, again, look for that MVP video very soon. Other than that, be doing some, videos, reactions, blah, 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 to the matches when they do actually start, coming up this weekend. So, look forward to that. And as always, thank you guys so very much for watching. I appreciate all of you. I hope you have yourselves an absolutely amazing week and weekend, and I'll see you in the next one.